You're ready to go.
Okay. Good afternoon. We want to thank all of you for joining our call today. This is a very special webinar today. It's sponsored by the Triad Pastors Network through the Maya Angelou Center for Health Equity at the Wake Forest School of Medicine. The Maya Angelou Center for Health Equity and Triad Pastors Network welcome each of you to this webinar. Our Ecumenical Pastors Network of over 109 faith leaders across faith are delighted to bring this webinar at this particular time. We are a new network that is asset-based, and we leverage the strengths and assets of all of our entities and friends abroad. The focus of this webinar is to share with you the impact of the CARES Act stimulus funds. Pastor Gailliard has graciously agreed to come and share with us. Many of you might know him. He was on our call last week, Pastor James Gailliard of the Word Tabernacle Church in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Pastor Gailliard has been serving for over 20 years there. He's also state representative of House District 25 in the North Carolina General Assembly. He serves on a number of very important committees, such as health and education, appropriations, K-12 education, policy, and general appropriations. Pastor Gailliard was introduced to us through another great bishop in Rocky Mount, Bishop Daniel. And he has just been so warm and so helpful to us. He's helped many churches to understand some of the things that he's involved with on a daily basis. So my name is Goldie Bird, and I direct the Maya Angelou Center for Health Equity. And it's been my pleasure to get to know Pastor Gailliard. Dr. Lamont Williams and I have had conversations with him, and he's done so many things to help assure that the flow of dollars get back to our churches and our communities. Last week, he gave us a preview of today's webinar, and we're just delighted that he's going to spend the entire hour with us today. He's also graciously agreed to stick around and ask questions and answer questions. And as always, we want you to text in your questions to the same number, 336-462-9503. Again, please text your questions into Pastor Gailliard at 336-462-9503. Unfortunately, today we had some WebEx issues, and so many of you are on the call. You called in, but you may not be able to see him. But again, when you text in your questions, you can also text in if you would like to receive a recording of today's webinar, or if you would like to receive his PowerPoint presentation, which he has already sent to us and is willing to share with you. Again, the number is 336-462-9503. If you would like to ask a question to Pastor Gailliard, or if you would like to receive any of the materials around today's webinar. Pastor Gailliard, thank you so much for being with us today and for signing on with us as a friend and partner. We so appreciate your willingness to do this today. We're going to ask you to give us just a brief prayer and then just go right into it.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Oh, and by the way, I apologize. He's also going to talk to us about the census and how important that is for our congregations and communities. Thank you all so much. Pastor Gailliard.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Let's pray. God, thanks for this day, and thank you for the leadership of Dr. Bird and Dr. Williams, and for all of the faith leaders that are present as part of this awesome network of pastors and faith community. I pray now, God, that you would give us wisdom, insight, and direction, that we can carry out your good and your perfect will. In the strong name of Jesus, we ask it. Amen. So thank you, Dr. Bird. I'm really appreciative for the opportunity to be with you at work. What I want to try to do is my slide deck as quickly as I possibly can so that we'll have as much time for questions. Just a quick overview about myself. I'm James Gailliard, pastor Word Tabernacle Church in Rocky Mount. Just share with you that Word Tabernacle is a Rocky Mount, Nash County-based congregation, but we do have a membership that comes from 10 North Carolina counties. And so we are a 15-year-old church. We started the church with 14 people 15 years ago, and we're about a 33 or 3,400 member church. We have 9 centers within the congregation that range everywhere from culinary arts and hospitality to health and wellness and media and broadcast and a bunch of other stuff. So that's one side. And then the other side is, as Dr. Bird says, I do serve in the North Carolina General Assembly representing Rocky Mount and House District 25. So today, what I want to try to do is share, and again, this presentation will be available. I'm titling this presentation Pastoral Leadership and Public Policy. How do we converge upon these two worlds, pastoral leadership and public policy? And I want to encourage pastors as we go through this presentation that we have an unusual opportunity because we assemble people, because we congregate people, and because we are a trusted source in our congregations and communities. We have an opportunity to leverage that assembling of people into other areas of life. We can assemble, as we assemble them, we can leverage it not just around faith and family, but we can leverage it around political influence. We can leverage it around health and wellness. We can leverage it around childhood, college, and career success, and workforce development, leadership development, and economic development, human development. I mean, we really have a lot of opportunities in terms of leveraging our influence. And I hope as we go through the presentation, some of that will become really, really evident. So the first thing that I want to do this afternoon is talk about the 2020 census, the significance of it and the importance of it. And I don't want to, I'm not on this call to preach, but sometimes as pastors, we need to be reminded that there is a real intersection between our faith and between what goes on legislatively in terms of civic affairs. They're not a detachment. And so remember, the Gospel of Luke reminds us that, when Jesus is born, there is a registration or a census, right? And so there is a participation by Joseph and his family to participate in the census. So this is not a stretch for us in terms of our faith context. So let me share a few things about why the census is important. And I cannot underscore enough, pastors, and I want to say this lovingly, but I just mean it with everything in me. I think we're doing a disservice to our community and a disservice to our congregation when we are not leveraging our influence to make sure that these kinds of initiatives are really fully being able to be executed under our watch. And so let me just talk a little bit about the impact to each of our individual communities. Number one is around political representation. Right now, we have 13 congressional seats in North Carolina. Those congressional seats are based upon population. If we count all of our residents, there's going to be enough immigration of new people in North Carolina to warrant for us a 14th congressional seat. So that's going to give us additional representation in Washington, which is a good thing as we look at federal appropriations for our state. But the other thing is, because this is done every 10 years and it's mandated by U.S. Constitution, what's going to happen once that, assuming we get that 14th seat, and I believe we will, as long as we don't have an undercount, that's part of where we come in as pastors, we're then going to redraw those 14 congressional districts. Not only are we going to redraw those 14 congressional districts, we're going to redraw our North Carolina House districts, and we're going to also redraw our Senate districts. So the census really determines what a lot of those boundaries are going to look like. So this is something that we're going to have to live with. You think living with this pandemic is difficult, and it is. Imagine having to live with something for the next 10 years. And that's what we're talking about. We don't get a do-over in 2021 or 2022 or 2023 and say, oh, wow, now we recognize how important it is. Let's go ahead and do it. It's going to be too late then. We're going to be stuck with these results for 10 years. So it's very important in terms of making sure every North Carolinian gets counted, particularly those in what they call high undercount communities. Communities where it's very likely, because of the geography, because of the social demographics, that there will be a lesser count. And in many times, that's going to be high poverty areas, high crime areas, and oftentimes areas where you have large populations of people of color. Once the census is completed, There's going to be 675 or a little bit more than that $1 billion that's going to be distributed as a result of those census numbers. So it's very important. The issue we're having is that North Carolina currently is 36th in the country. I mean, out of 50, okay, guys? So let's just understand that we're 36th in the country for response rate right now. I asked Dr. Bird, and she kindly just to give me some ideas of the counties that are represented on this call. So she gave me 5. Let me tell you what the current percentages are. The best in the group is Guilford County. Guilford County is at a 55% response rate. That still means, y'all, 45% of the people haven't responded. Forsyth County is at a 52% response rate. The worst in the group is Durham County. Durham County is just under 50%. I believe it's like 49.2. Davidson County is at 52%. Alamance County is at 52%. And just to give you an idea of how that compares to where I pastor, my community right now is at 50%. Edgecombe County is at 46%. And in many situations, Wilson County is at 49%. In many situations, these are tier 1 counties, meaning they already have a higher percentage of poverty, less jobs, their school funding is lesser. They really cannot afford to be blocked out of this federal kind of funding. So that's where we stand right now as a state. What does that mean, dollars and cents? What that means, dollars and cents, is that for every 3% of an undercount, we lose 1,823 federal and state dollars per person. I mean, you calculate that. That's on a 3% undercount, $1,800 per person that would come into our communities that does not come into our communities. You multiply that by the possibility, that's 3%. What happens if we wind up with a 40% undercount, 45% undercount? So this shows you the significance of us participating. And so what are some of the things that we're looking at in terms of the dollars that come in? You're talking about, $1.8 billion that goes into rural communities, hundreds of millions of dollars for veterans, hundreds of millions of dollars for children under the age of 5. You're talking about feeding programs. You're talking about Get Smart programs. You're talking about early reading programs. Why does this matter for us? It matters for us as pastors because these are the people that are in our congregations. These are the people that we have professed that we love and want to protect, and yet we're not being really providing really great leadership to be able to say, these are dollars that we need to make sure that we're getting into our community. So the 2020 census will do a few things. It's going to, as I said, determine the allocation of several $100 billion. Secondly, it's going to bring tax dollars already paid back to our communities, more than $16,000 per person over the next decade, according to a George Washington study. It's going to support critical infrastructure, right? Housing, public transportation. I'll give you an example. Here in Rocky Mount, we have been waiting forever to get a Panera Bread, right? And so we were waiting forever to get a Panera. Wilson had one. Everybody else around us had one. When restaurants, retailers, food chain organizations, when they're looking at where do I put up my next business, they're checking census data, right? And so this impacts, all types of retail. Retail, food establishments, those are entry-level jobs for college kids. Those are opportunities for people that may need a second income. When we're looking at building out the infrastructure for public transportation, when we're looking at building out the infrastructure of schools, let's just say we have a major undercount with children, and we typically have an undercount as it relates to school-age children. The significance of that is if you're trying to build a new school in your community, but the census suggests that there's a decrease in a certain population, it's going to be a hard sell to the county commissioners or to DPI or to the state legislators to get those schools funded. So the ripple effect of us having an undercount is really damaging to our communities. Additionally, the census serves as foundation data for state demographers. And so as they're looking at tax revenue structures, as they're looking at different models around local government, demographers are looking at this data. And you can read these slides and you'll get them as if you just request them. It impacts state redistricting. We talked about that. North Carolina is a state that has been living with gerrymandered districts for many years now. Those district lines are about to be redrawn. How they are redrawn is really going to depend on if we can successfully count the number of people that are in a community. Because let's use me as an example. As someone in the House of Representatives, I'm tasked with representing somewhere in the neighborhood of 83,000 North Carolinians. So I represent 83,000 North Carolinians, as does every state rep. So now think about it for a moment. If in my community, let's just say Rocky Mount is the example. If we undercount Rocky Mount and Nash County, and I'm supposed to represent 80-some thousand people, and we undercount and we only wind up counting 65,000 people, then my district now has to be redrawn to pick up that additional 15,000 people. Depending on how that district is redrawn, it could be redrawn in such a way that it's no longer favorable for me representing them. So it has a real life impact upon how we all do business on a day-by-day basis in every area. And then finally, this census provides data for the next 10 years. As I said, it's a decennial census. It's mandated constitutionally to do every 10 years. It's been businesses are going to use this for planning purposes for the next 10 years. Most of us that are on this call, I would imagine, have real needs around low-income housing and workforce housing. How do you think then organizations, federal agencies decide what kind of federal dollars get pumped into what communities? Well, they're going to make those decisions based upon census data. And so, if we want to really do ourselves a favor and be able to position ourselves as North Carolinians and as pastors who love our people and care about our communities so that we have the best possible shot at being able to build out low-income housing and workforce housing, I think the census is our best shot at doing that. And so one last slide about the census, and then I want to talk about the CARES Act. Because of the coronavirus and the pandemic, there is now a revised schedule on when the census will be completed, and I wanted you to be aware of this. I like this and I don't like this, and I'll tell you why. I like it because we need more time. I don't like it because I don't want us to feel like it's not important and we can keep putting it off. And so we've got to be really, really cautious that, okay, we have until October 31st to get this done, but we should not be acting like we have till October 31st. So let me be practical for just a moment. I'm a pastor. I literally sat down in front of a computer, had somebody hold a camera up to me. I'm a little fortunate because I do have a broadcast studio here at my church. And I literally shot a 5-minute time-elapsed video of myself taking the census, and said to I played it at the 5-minute countdown before service started on Sunday. So right before service starts, I'm very anal when it comes to time management. I tell people I'd rather you steal my money than my time because I can make more money, but I can't make more time. And so I'm really big on time management. So because of that, at our church, we have a countdown clock. And so, we have an 8 a.m., 10 a.m., and 12 noon service. And at 5 minutes before 8 o'clock, there's a countdown that runs so that we start exactly at 8 o'clock or exactly at 10 o'clock or exactly at 12 o'clock. Well, what we did last week is while that countdown was going, because we have all these virtual online people watching, we played the 5-minute video of me taking the census. And, I said to the congregation, you've got to take the census. We're surveying our church. We're reminding them by way of emails and text messages and phone calls. I want to implore you, using the words of scriptures, pastors, I want to implore you, I want to beseech you, I want to beg you to make sure that we are being a good partner to make sure that the census is completed. So if you've not done that, please do that. I just changed my graphic on my Facebook page where it says I count, because I really do believe as pastors, we need to model the leadership that we want from our members. And I'll give you, an easy example of that. 12 years ago, we did HIV/AIDS testing in Nash and Edgecombe County with the health department. And to provide good leadership, I was the first person who took the test because I wanted our congregation and our community to see leadership in action. I think that's what we need in this season from those of us who are pastors. You are a trusted voice, and I just want to beg you to seriously take the census seriously, and let's make sure that we're leading our people through the process of the census. So that's the first 20 minutes, 20 minutes of my presentation is the census. Let's shift gears and let's talk about the CARES Act. And I'm gonna try to angle this a little differently because we've been hearing so much. And so I want to make sure that I'm addressing issues that are relevant for those of us who are pastors. And so some of this will be reviewed, but I'm deliberately trying to angle this presentation in a little bit different direction. And so, first of all, what does CARES stand for? It literally stands for the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. It's been rolled out in a couple of phases. A new phase has just been approved and signed by the president last week. And I'm going to talk about the major components of the program. But I want to talk about it in a little bit of a different way. And so most people don't talk about the legislation from the perspective of various divisions. The legislation was written in various divisions, and I want to kind of cover the divisions first. And the reason I want to do this is because oftentimes we focus on a single program and we don't recognize the other resources that are available to us beyond those programs. Everybody is talking about the payroll protection program, and I'm not minimizing that. My church applied in the first round of funding. We got approved, and we took advantage of that opportunity. And so I understand it not just from a legislative perspective. I also understand it from a pastor, nonprofit, small business lens. We are a pretty large employer. We have, somewhere in the neighborhood of about an $80,000 a month payroll. And so we're a pretty robust organization. So I do understand this from a small business lens, but I think it's really important that we understand that there are some other opportunities that are available to us long after the payroll protection program money is spent. So having said that, let's walk through the legislation. And I know this is risky because legislation can be really boring. I mean, it's a several hundred-page document. I probably read 250 of those pages and was a part of working with our congressional delegation to make sure that nonprofits and faith entities were included into this legislation. The first division of the legislation is to keep working people paid and employed, bottom line. And we're going to talk about that relative to the payroll protection program. The reason I'm lifting this up is because if you take money from the payroll protection program or EIDL, whatever other programs I'm going to talk about, understand the entire purpose of it is to keep people working. That's the bottom line. It is a stimulus to keep people working. So if I take the money and I don't keep people working, it's real simple. I got to get the money back. I mean, because that is the whole point of it, right? The other big part is around healthcare system enhancements and around economic stabilization. Now, let's kind of drill down a little bit. So within that first division, you have various sections. And again, everybody's talking about the Paycheck Protection Program. That's just one section. This bill has hundreds of sections. Section 1102 is payroll protection. I'm going to go through these quickly. The next section is entrepreneurial development. The next section doesn't really have a big impact on us, around state trade expansion programming. The next section is around a waiver of matching fund requirement for women business center programming. Very important. Let me pause here for just a moment. Many of us who are pastors, we have more women in our congregation than men. That's just the reality, and I don't have time to get into the theological doctrinal reasons for that. There are lots of good ones. My church is about 60% female and about 40% male. Most churches are probably 65 to 70% female. Why does this matter? There is an entire section in the CARES Act dedicated to how matching fund requirements can get waived as a requirement for women businesses. when a lot of times when you're applying for federal dollars, it requires a match. Okay. Well, in some sections of this bill, those matches have been lifted. So this is a major opportunity for women-owned businesses, right? I can guarantee you, most people are not talking about it. And that's why I want you to see the bigger components of the bill and how we can take advantage of it for a much longer time than we even realize. Section 1106 specifically spells out for us loan forgiveness and how that works. And so I've had people say to me, why would the church apply for another loan? You got to pay the money back. And my answer has been because if you manage the money that you get right, it's going to convert into a forgiveness, which means it's really in all essence a grant, which is why I really, really encourage churches to apply. Then I'm going to talk about what that looks like. And then Section 1107 is about direct appropriation. So it literally lays out all of the appropriations. And let me just stop here for just one moment and educate us just a little bit about this. I was on a call 2 nights ago, Legislative Black Caucus, and Jim Sills, who's president and CEO of Mechanics and Farmer. He was walking us through some of this. And then I was on another call with Wells Fargo and PNC with their presidents talking about this as well. A lot of times we don't fully understand. So when we hear $350 billion has been made available to the SBA, Small Business Administration, to fund the payroll protection program, what we are thinking is that these banks now have been given $350 billion. That's not what happened. What has happened is that the banks now, they still have to fund these programs with the money they have. So this is not a new influx of money that Mechanics and Farmer, and I use them as an example because that's who we bank with, but whether it's Mechanics and Farmer or Wells Fargo, they didn't suddenly get an influx of cash from the Small Business Administration. That's not what happened. The reason it's important for us to understand this is because you have this very simple application that comes down from the Small Business Administration. Every bank, for the most part, put another application on the front end of it because they still have to do their own underwriting. I mean, all the Small Business Administration is saying to them is, we're going to guarantee the money. We're going to guarantee the loan. So if there is a default or whatever, it won't come from you. But they still have to fund the actual money that comes out. So this is a really important issue. This is why. So if you're wondering, most banks are not there are a few examples I know in Wilmington, and I can get the names of those banks if you need them, just text me. But most banks are not accepting applications from organizations that they don't already have a banking relationship with. And the reason is because this is money that's coming out from their actual banks. So I want us to understand that process as we kind of talk about that a little bit more. Section 1108 is minority business development language. Section 1109 is how the Treasury is kind of granting management authority to accomplish this. This rolls out to credit unions, minority-owned banks, majority banks, FDIC, et cetera. EIDL grants, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the opportunity for those grants, because in some situations, pastors, every pastor, look, I mean, I have pastored every size church. I started a church with 14 people. It was networks like this 15 years ago, I wasn't invited to. And I wasn't invited to as a pastor because I was told I had company and not a church, because that's how small my church was. So I have pastored every size church, from a small church to now a mega church. So I have an understanding of the pastor that is the only employee, or it's a pastor, a musical person, and maybe a person that's cleaning, and maybe a part-time administrator. I understand that. The reason I'm raising that is in some situations, the emergency EIDL grant might be a better choice than the payroll protection program. I mean, it maxes out at $10,000. So like, obviously, a person like myself with a larger church, that's not the best option. But if you have a small church, maybe you're bivocational, you receive a small additional compensation, but not a lot from your congregation. It's a 30 or 40 member church. It's a really good likelihood that an EIDL grant is going to be your best option. So I wanted to understand kind of the bigger implications of some of the programming that's out here. That was all the first division, right? The first big section. If you notice back, I'll put this back on the slide. All of these sections started with 1,100 numbers. Now we're getting into the next section, which is 2,100 numbers. This whole section was around assistance for American workers, families, and businesses. This is where the unemployment insurance piece comes in. This is major. This is major because, first of all, unfortunately, this is why I'll put a quick plug in, not for me, but just for the importance of voting. This is why it is so important that we make sure people are voting at our local elections. North Carolina has one of the worst unemployment insurance programs in the country, one of the worst in the country. Fortunately, there's been this federal influx of federal dollars. Let me back up. Let me not emotionalize that statement. Let me give some evidence so that you understand what I'm saying. When I say North Carolina has one of the worst in the country, what I'm saying is that we provide one of the lowest benefits of any other state in the country. And I'm saying we provide that benefit for the shortest period of time, okay? So in North Carolina, there's a longer waiting period, qualify for unemployment. When you do get it, there's a maximum that is much lower than the average state, and you can't be on it as long, right? So we just have a really, really poor unemployment program here. And we've got billions of dollars in reserves about it. So again, this is where we have to become educated around who we elect into office to make what decisions. The blessing is that there's been an influx of federal dollars under the Title II provision of the CARES Act, which starts with the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. That's in Section 2102. And then you have an additional 2103, which is the Emergency Unemployment Relief for Governmental Entities and Nonprofit Organizations. Notice what I said, and nonprofit organizations. Let me pause here for a moment. We don't participate, we don't pay into unemployment at our church because as a church, churches and nonprofits have the option to not pay into unemployment insurance. And most times we don't. So if you were to lay off an organist or a musician or someone that works full-time for the church, under the state laws of North Carolina, if you didn't pay into the unemployment insurance program, you can't draw any unemployment. I mean, that kind of makes sense, right? With this new process, federal dollars have lifted that cap. They've lifted that waiver. And they said, hold up, that prohibition no longer exists. Even if someone did not pay into the program, they're still entitled under this funding to receive the dollars. That is huge because in many situations, pastors have had to make, or church trustee boards or deacon boards or elder boards or whatever your church governance structure is, has had to make the very difficult decision of laying off or furloughing, whatever term you want to use, reducing the salary of, say, your organist or your pianist or your music director or choir director, whatever the case is. Historically, they wouldn't have been able to apply. Now they're able to apply. And even if the church was an additional funding source for them. So, you know, most of my music staff, for example, they work somewhere else full time. And then they also receive compensation from the church. I have a few full-time music people, but most of them they're bivocational kind of people. What's good about the emergency increase in unemployment compensation benefits, Section 2104, 2107, the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation Program, what's good about all of these is that it will compensate people for loss of income, not loss of total income. So if I'm working full-time at one company, but I'm making an extra, $200 a week playing for the church says, hey, I can't pay you anymore, and I lose that $200 a week income. With this program, people can apply for that. The other thing that they've done, again, this is Section 2112 of this section, the second big title, is that they've waived the 7-day waiting period. So now you're no longer the waiting period that existed under the Railroad Unemployment Insurance Act. That waiting period has been waived, so people can receive benefits quicker. So that's another benefit. That's the second big title. Let me go through the other big titles, and then I guess we'll be in a little while open this up for questions. Title 3 has to do with supporting America's healthcare system. So there's dollars that have been directed specifically at healthcare. We're in the midst right now in North Carolina. We passed this, as you know, we have not expanded Medicaid in North Carolina. As a matter of fact, I filed a bill on Tuesday to provide health care to working families. But we have not expanded it statewide yet. But to show you how things are changing, through the health committee this week and on the House floor today, we approved our version of the House bill. And part of that version was to provide Medicaid dollars to people that are have been infected with the coronavirus. And so we're now freeing up Medicaid dollars specifically directed at the pandemic. Some of that has been able to happen because there's been legislation added federally that opens up the door for us to do that at the state level. That's Title III. Title IV is around economic stabilization. And I want you to hear this, to severely distressed sectors of the economy, okay? And that's a good, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Relief funds are Title V, and then miscellaneous provisions are in Title VI. And so that's the bill. It took me, 15 minutes just to quickly highlight how massive the bill is. Now that we have an understanding of how massive the bill is, let's kind of go through a funnel and kind of talk about some of the key things that we might benefit from as churches and nonprofits relative to the bill. The one everybody's talking about is the payroll or the payment protection program, PPP. And so let's talk about what that does. And I think I've got a slide for this, and so let me kind of read through on the slide so I don't get too far behind. And so the first thing that I want us to understand is that the church or the nonprofit had to have been in operation February 15th of 2020. That's number one, because we've had people that, it's got to be a real church. It's got to be a real business. That's all I'm trying to say. So it opens it up to any business concern. So that includes 501c3, which are nonprofits. It includes 501c19s, which are veterans organizations. It includes whole litany of other and tribal businesses. And so that's a really important factor. We do get to participate in the program. How much money can I borrow? Well, you have to have under 500 employees. The loans go up to $10 million. The last conversation I had from Small Business Administration, which was on Monday, time kind of runs in together, and I'll pull up my notes while I'm going through these slides. But the average North Carolina loan, I think, is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $150,000. I know our church's was about 180, 185, I think it was, but they've had loans as small as 15,000, and they've gone up from there into, the $1 million range. And so what they're going to ask you to do is basically take 250% of your average monthly payroll, or whatever your monthly payroll is, and multiply it by 2.5. Let me just park here for just a moment. I'm sorry, that was preacher language. And I said, let's park here for a moment. I guess the preacher is coming out. Let me just pause here for just a moment and say to us that I do have an Excel spreadsheet that already has the formulas in it. If you need it, you email me, pastor@wordtab.net. I'm happy to send that to you. It's not proprietary, it's not deep. I'm fortunate to have some really, really outstanding staff people that can spend time building out pivot tables and doing that kind of thing. We're happy. All you got to do is plug your numbers in, okay? So there's some controversy around the guidance. Let me just pause here and give you that language, because sometimes we use the same words but not the same dictionary. When I say guidance, what I mean is that language will come down from the feds to the state. The state now has to implement the program. Or in the case of SBA, the money goes out from the federals, it goes to Small Business Administration. From Small Business Administration, it has to be implemented by local banks. In order for that connection to happen from Fed to state, or from like SBA to banks, they have to issue what's called guidance, right? And they'll say to them, hey, this is how you do it. The problem is that the guidance is always moving, and you have to be really careful to make sure you're getting right information from trusted sources. And so let me give you an example of guidance, controversy. 1099 versus W-2s. You know, so when I'm looking at monthly payroll, can I include 1099 people? My answer to you on that is no, you cannot. But I promise you, there's somebody on the earth that's going to tell you you can. I just don't think they're right. I think it's going to push back your application. You know, so it's a W-2 employee only. I hope I can say this in love since I'm a pastor as well, and everyone will receive this coming from a pastor. I do think this has opened up the door for us to clean our house. And let me give you one simple thing, and I say this very respectfully. Let's use your church musician as an example. Your church musician should not be 1099. I mean, it's just that simple. And if you look at the IRS rules around the definition of an employee, your church musician is an employee. And because he or she is an employee, they should not be 1099. You're directing their work. You're providing the environment for their work. You're providing the instrument for their work. They meet every qualification for an employee. Let me tell you why I'm sharing this information. Because now a program has become available that you can receive dollars to help you keep that musician. But if you've been 1099ing that musician, they're not eligible under this program. They're going to have to apply for pandemic. Now, the good thing about the pandemic unemployment insurance is that people that are 1099 can apply for the unemployment insurance, but you as the institution, as the organization, you can't apply on their behalf. So this is an opportunity, pastors, to clean our house. And so if we're not, you know, I just say this respectfully, if you got a bunch of folks that you've been 1099 and that are really employees, this is the opportunity to say, you know what, let me use this as some clarity that this is my season to go ahead and create this structure where individuals are being W-2, taxes are being taken out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the payroll potential program. What costs are eligible? Salaries, wages, commissions, basically any kind of compensation that comes in. You're paying people, you know, around parental leave, what you're paying for their medical insurance is covered. So if you're like us, I mean, we've got a really big Blue Cross and Blue Shield bill we pay every month because of the premiums. We pay 100% of our employee coverage and 50% of our dependent coverage. So all of those premium costs, we can roll into that. We have a 403B in our church, and so we have a matching pension program. So anything that we pay in terms of retirement benefits is eligible as well. And again, we have the spreadsheet already built out for you. Email me, we'll send it to you. And I have a staff person that if you have questions, she'll be happy to kind of talk about. What are the allowable uses of the loan proceeds? In other words, what do I do with the money once I get it? Again, remember what I said at the beginning of our presentation? This stimulus, this money is designed to stimulate us to keep people employed. And so because of that, the biggest cost is going to be payroll. So payroll cost is number one, but you can include some rent, some utilities, some mortgage, some of those other kinds of costs. And so that's how you need to lose the money. I want to rush here because I want to have time for a few minutes of questions. Now, let's talk about whether or not it is a loan or a grant. So first of all, it's going to start off a loan, okay, because that's what it is to begin with. So when you're going to apply at your local bank, you have to apply at your local bank. You cannot apply directly through SBA because remember what I said in the beginning, the SBA is really giving this program to local banks, and that's really where the implementation occurs. And so what's going to happen is that, you know, you're going to apply. Hopefully you have great banking relationships. I want to pause here and say this, and I say this respectfully. I think there are two things every church or nonprofit needs. Number one, you need really, really good administration, really clean structure. And then number two, really great banking relationships. Because I'm going to tell you, if you don't have a great banking relationship, your application is going to get put to the bottom of the barrel. It is what it is. So if all you have is a relationship with a bank that you're basically making deposits and making withdrawals, you don't have the cell number of the VP, you don't have the cell number of the branch manager, you don't have that kind of relationship, this is an opportunity for us to learn from this season we're in and to begin developing out those kinds of opportunities. So you're going to apply through your bank. Hopefully you'll get approved. They're going to send you some loan documents because it starts off as a loan. You're going to sign off. All of those normal underwriting requirements are being lifted. The normal, sometimes they require an individual to kind of endorse it. That's all being lifted. And then what's going to happen is you're going to get the money. And then, after about 4 months, they're going to say, okay, let's do a look back period. And they're going to give you a window of time based upon the window of time you used when you applied. And they're going to say, now give us an apples to apples comparison of what your payroll looks like in this window compared to the window from last year when you gave us your average salary numbers. They're going to base it on two things. They're going to base it, number one, on the pure dollar of what that average monthly cost is. So let's say, to make the math easy, it was $10,000 a month payroll cost. Now it's $10,000 a month, and they're going to look at payroll costs and FTEs, or full-time equivalents. So they're going to say, of that $10,000, how many people was that? And you're going to say that was 3.5 people, or whatever it is, right? Then they're going to ask you again, how much was it? And you're going to say, well, it was $9,000 and it was 3 people versus 3.5 people. And then based upon that, there's going to be a window of forgiveness. And that winds up that's where the guidance is a little iffy. That number is going to be somewhere in the 20% range. If you're within a 20% margin, they're going to write it all off, and the loan will be forgiven. If you kept all the money to pay the rent, or to pay the mortgage, or to pay the utilities, and you let go of all your staff, you're going to wind up paying that money back. And so just something to keep in mind. That's the payroll protection program. You have the small business debt relief program that's available. I don't have opportunity to talk about this today, but if you need more information, the slide will give you an overview of what this program does. I do think it's a really good option for some people. Then you've got the economic injury disaster loan. I was talking about this a little bit in the beginning. This is an emergency advance of up to $10,000. And nonprofits are eligible if you've been harmed by COVID-19. And who hasn't been, right? I mean, we're not assembling people. I don't know well, I guess there's some. Very few churches are receiving 100% of their tithes and offerings right now. So in some regards, all of us have been hurt by this. And this is an opportunity, I think, a really good venue or vehicle rather, for smaller churches. And so this is something that would encourage you to take a look at. And that's it. That's the last slide I have. So I could cover some other things, but I'd much rather open up, for questions. I've been talking for about 45 or 50 minutes. And so let me just pause here for a moment, Dr. Bird, if I can, see if I can address specific things that might be people that are listening.
Dr. Gailliard, thank you so much for the incredible information that you gave us. One of the great things about these calls and webinars is those of us who work with our center get so much from them ourselves when we're not pastors. So thank you so much for that. It was wonderful, and I know that our pastors have gleaned so much from it. I know I did. We do have several questions for you, but just before we begin the question and answer session, I just want to remind the audience that you can call in your questions at 336-462-9503. Text in your questions again, 336-462-9503. And also, if you would like to receive Pastor Gailliard's slides or the recording or anything, just text that to us with your email address and let us know. We would be happy to pass these materials along. The questions that we've received so far are, one, do you know if there is any correlation of completion of the census with areas that have a high density of people of color?
I don't know that I'm getting full the gist of that question, so I want to make sure that I may be answering the wrong question, and I apologize. What I will tell you is that populations with a high density of people of color tend to be considered areas where there's going to be an undercount. And a lot of times that has to do with misunderstandings that people have relative to the census. So, they've got, somebody living there that, I'm living in public housing as an example, right? And, the public housing rules say that, person who just got parole can't live with me, but the person's living there. And I don't want to say that they're living there because I'm afraid of what's going to happen relative to my housing. So I don't mention that that person is there. Or I'm taking care of, particularly with children, this is the case in communities with high density peoples of color, because we tend to be very familial. So because of that, if there's a problem with my sister, right, and I'm going to take care of her 3-year-old while she gets herself together, it's kind of under the radar because I don't want the child taken by the system. So when the census time comes, I don't really count that child because I don't want anything to happen to my sister, don't want anybody to know. So if I'm understanding the question right, yes, where you have high densities of people, you are going to experience some of those dynamics where you have an undercount. And that is why the faith community is so important, because we are the trusted voices in those environments. And because we're the trusted voices, you know who's living with who, the dynamics of those homes, and they will tell you the truth. If you work alongside of them to take the census, they'll tell you the truth so that every information can be put out.
Thank you. The next question is, it says currently the EIDL is not accepting new applications. How do we access the other funds that you mentioned related to women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, et cetera?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think with the new funding, and I need to check this, but I do believe with the new round of funding, EIDL funding has been made available and additional PPP money has been made available. And so I would double check that. All of these programs are going to be accessed through small business, through banks that normally do business with the Small Business Administration. So to answer the question regarding funding opportunities relative to women-owned businesses, this is where your bank relationship is going to be so important. I'm going to be a little presumptive. I'm going to say this presumptively, Dr. Bird, and I don't want to offend anyone, but it's just the free advice of a preacher. I think that there is value in having a banking relationship with a large institution and a banking relationship with a small community-based bank. I have just found value in that. We do that. And so I would, again, encourage you to begin building those kinds of relationships. But the person who is really holding the cards, so to speak, on these programs is going to be your local bank that does business with the Small Business Administration. Every bank does not do 7A loans and Small Business Administration loans. I have a listing of banks that do, and so if that's something you need, email me, pastor@wordtab.net. I'm happy to send that listing to you. And I believe it's being updated on the Small Business Administration website as well. Dr. Bird, there's a question that came in on the chat. I'm going to go ahead and just read this, and that is how to use PPP during the year. And so you're going to get about, again, this is for 2.5 months. So it's going to be 2.5 months worth of payroll. So it's going to be about a 4-month window that they're going to give you before that look back period starts. And so again, it's short-term stimulus dollars. So the objective is let's keep people working these next couple of months, because the hope is we keep people working these next couple of months and we can get on the other side of this and we can get back to normalcy as quickly as possible. If we had time, I do want to speak about that issue, but that's how much time you'll have.
Great. And I've heard so many people, or several people say that they've been more successful with one type of bank or the other. So I'm really happy you brought that up. Some with the larger bank, but certainly some with the smaller local banks. Absolutely. Another question, and when you apply, how long before you would know if you are approved for
Sure. I'll use myself as an example because we did the process as well. We applied on a Friday. The following Monday, we knew whether or not we were approved. So for us, that's what? That's 10 calendar days or 5 or 6 work. It was really 5 working days, and we knew. Let me just say this, guys. I'm gonna probably get myself in trouble, but if you've got a banking relationship with a smaller community bank that does business with the SBA, might be your best shot. Because let me tell you the difference. Your small community banks are getting 100, 150, 200 applications. Your larger banks are getting 10,000 applications. And so, that really does determine how quickly you're going to hear. And so just something for you to keep in mind. So it could be, again, my experience was 5 working days, right? 7, 8 calendar days, 9 calendar days. I have an outstanding banking relationship. I can get VPs and the presidents, text messages back and forth. So I do think this is that opportunity, and that's what I hope you'll hear from me. I know we want to get through this season, and we will please be clear, we will get through this. But let's make sure we get through this learning the lessons of the season. And one of those lessons is a robust infrastructure and a building out of great relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another question, why did the 1099 change to the W-2 in the beginning of the PPP program?
Yeah, this was tricky, and I think part of it, and I'm not a congressman, but this is what based upon the conversations, what I think happened. The 1099 group put in the pandemic unemployment insurance side of the program. We couldn't do it both ways, right? So, instead, W-2 people got included institutionally, and then the 1099 people got the opportunity on the pandemic unemployment side. So just use the example as a church musician. Let's say you happen to be, I hope you weren't, but if you happen to be one of those churches that are 1099 musicians, and you can't continue to pay them, they can apply on the pandemic unemployment side. You can't apply for them on the institutional side because that's just going to be W-2. So that's the difference. Let me say something else about this unemployment, if I can, Dr. Bird, because I think it's really important for people to understand. Even if you're a tax accountant, so you're a hairdresser, a barber, church musician, whatever your area is in your 1099, and you're not eligible under the North Carolina program, unemployment program, you still must apply and get rejected. You have to apply because you applying is what puts you in the hopper for the pandemic federal dollars. So you can't bypass the state system to apply there is no federal unemployment system. It is a state-run program. So because of that, you have to apply. You say, well, I'm not eligible. I know that. Apply and get denied. And the moment you get denied, you then are put in the hopper for the pandemic side. And I would encourage you to do that because the look-back period starts when you apply. And so the quicker you apply, the quicker you can get the benefit.
Great. So these laid off from church cannot get unemployment, the employment application processed until the church verifies the employee status. How can you verify if we were not currently paying unemployment insurance?
That is a great question, and it is a loophole in the system. So, what we've done, because we had someone like, for example, we had seasonal people, like an after-school program. So this was the only group in our church that we couldn't keep on because we just didn't have the program anymore. So our after-school programming staff, because we stopped our after-school program, they had to apply. We had this happen. We're not in the system. So the only way you can do it at that point is, one or two things are going to happen. Number one, whoever does the HR at that church has to keep calling until they get someone. There have been another 250 people hired at the state level, so the phone is getting easier to be answered, and people are even able to get through a little bit easier. But the second scenario is if the church does not verify, then the application is going to still get denied, which is ultimately what you want anyway. You need to get the denial, because once you get the denial, you can then be put into the hopper. So the fact that the church is not in the system is not going to hinder your ability to still get the approval. But I would ask that churches really try to do their due diligence and work really hard to get through and talk to somebody, because it does make the application go quicker.
Great. Can you share some suggestions on procedures to reach our church and community members concerning the census during this social distancing environment who can't be reached through technology? Virtual means, as in Pastor Gailliard's example.
Is a great question. We started what's called, and I wanted to give you this language. I hope every church will embrace it. And I think Dr. Bird gave this being the academic initiative. We're using the terminology standard of care. So we're saying to ourselves, what is the standard of care that we want to be able to offer any person that is a Wordite, whether they go to Word Tabernacle Church, whether they are 90 years old or whether they are 19 years old and have all the bells and whistles of technology. So we're creating a standard of care. So what that means for us is that we know who that population of people are that don't have internet access or who are not on the internet. And for that population of people, we're serving them by way of postcards, handwritten notes, phone calls, things like that. So what I would encourage you to do is to develop a system. People need something to do right now. So for your volunteers, they can do handwritten notes. They can call people's homes. They can do a drop-by. So we are servicing our people with those means of technology, without technology, by using some of those kinds of standards of care practices.
Awesome. Doesn't get too many volunteers. Can you tell us some additional reasons why residents who are somewhat wary of federal government entities should complete the census to benefit their local community?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of information about what's to happen. I believe the federal legislation is the 72-year rule. I need to go back through my notes now. But basically, nothing can be released to agencies, whether immigration or anybody, for 72 years. Literally, that is written into legislation federally. And so I think it's a matter of educating people around the truths of the matter. I know this is a sermon I've already preached today. I'm going to say it again. Pastors, we are the trusted voices in our community. When we say to our congregation, this is safe for you to do, there won't be a negative impact on a child being put into the foster care system. There won't be a negative impact around immigration. There won't be a negative impact around whatever the case is. When we, with our trusted voices, say that to people, we're the best shot the community has around breaking down some of those silos and misnomers about what's really going on with the census.
Great. Just a couple more, Pastor. So this one says, what is being done to ensure that mid-sized churches are assured a portion of these monies?
That's another great question. I was on the phone with some banks fighting over this very. The short answer is the one that nothing is happening to ensure that every church has an equal bite at the apple. This is strictly a matter of telling you. Application is not difficult, but the issue of the banking relationship is so key. I know I keep saying it, but it's true. And so a mid-sized church, and I don't know how we would define that. Let's say that that's a 350 to 500 member church. Will have no problem getting approved if they have good infrastructure and a good banking relationship. I have no more advantage as a mega church than the church with 400 or 500 members. The key is making sure you submit your data. And the reason I say this is important, because if you have a banking relationship, they already know your church budget. They already have a copy of your annual audit. Every year, the bank gets a copy of our audit. They have it on file. So when we submitted our application, they already have my budget for the year, so they already knew what my salaries were, and they already have my audited financials. So literally within minutes, they were signing off on it and sending it to SBA. So it's not so much about the size of church as it is the quality of the infrastructure of the church. And I think this is really that season of opportunity where we can improve upon that.
Right. Can you apply for multiple of these loans, or are you limited to one? And can a person working part-time, such as a college student, apply for unemployment for reduction of wages?
Yeah, two great questions. You can only apply for one program. So that's why I think it's important to see the program that might be best for you. And so that EIDL program, is a really good option because it kind of caps at $10,000. That's, again, for language, EIDL is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And so that's a really good opportunity to, for people that, may not want to go through these normal channels. And then the second question around the college students, yes, if they've had a loss of income, they can still apply through the pandemic unemployment insurance. Yeah.
Right. It sounds as if the CARES Act funding will not be as helpful to those who provide their employees with a 1099 versus those who provide a W-2. Is this correct? And if so, are there any penalties to changing over now? Are there?
Yeah, yes, great. So let me, first of all, to answer your question, yes, it's no doubt that on the payroll, the PPP, it really is directed at organizations with actual employees, W-2 employees. But remember, the 1099 employees can benefit on the pandemic unemployment insurance side. The organization won't, but if you're not paying them anymore anyway from 1099, that's expense that has fallen off your balance sheet, and so you still benefit in that regard. So you're right. That's number one, that it does benefit W-2 employees. Now, this is the reason you raise a really great question, because I do know churches that are including 1099 employees in their application for PPP. Problem is, you kind of start exposing yourself that I've got people that are 1099 that really should be W-2s, and there could be penalties attached to that. And so if it were me, I would not be including 1099 people on my PPP application. To answer your question, is it too late to change? It's never too late to do the right thing. So what I would encourage you to do is look at IRS guidelines around the definition of an employee. And if your people that are getting 1099s meet that definition, then I think you need to convert over and make them W-2 employees. I think it's the best practice, provides a better structure for our organization.
Here's a link question. He says, how does this apply to a church with employees that did not set up their employees, such as musicians and janitors, who chose a 1099 or just a reduction in pay rather than layoff?
Yeah, another good question. On the church side, it doesn't, it's no harm, no foul. You won't be able to benefit it. So let's just say, hypothetically, you were paying a musician $300 a Sunday, and now you're saying, okay, I'm gonna pay you $150 a Sunday because, you're doing a rehearsal and you're doing an online service, but that's it. Or let's just say you're not paying them at all. That money's just gonna fall off your expenses. He or she can go ahead and apply for unemployment, but the only benefit you get is it falls off your expenses and it's no longer a liability to the congregation.
Wonderful. We have one more question, Pastor, and then we're going to just turn you loose. I bet your voice is getting a little tired. We so appreciate you hanging out with us. All right, so we have one more. For individuals who are still working and their work hours are reduced, where would they go to apply for unemployment, and would they have to apply for it differently from someone who has lost their job? if that makes sense.
I'm sorry, I didn't mute. Yeah, it does make sense. And it's the same process. And again, this is something that makes the pandemic unemployment insurance, the other unemployment insurance benefits unique in this coronavirus season, is that I can apply for a reduction in wage because of a reduction in wages. And I would apply in that same process. And again, you're going to be denied the first round because the initial state program does not qualify. And that's the starting point. That's the gatekeeper, so to speak. So you'll apply the normal way reduction. The important thing is to indicate it's a result of coronavirus pandemic. You'll get denied, and then you'll automatically get picked up on the pandemic under the other two pandemic unemployment insurance programs. And before we go, Dr. Bird, and I really do appreciate the platform and the opportunity, and I'm hoping that our time has been helpful and value added for people. Just a reminder that there is a stimulus check, the economic impact payment, that $1,200 payment. I'm getting a lot of questions around whether or not people that receive Social Security or pensions qualify. And the answer to that question is yes, they do. My mother is 87 years old. She lives with me, and she received her economic impact payment yesterday. And so do qualify, and it is an automatic direct deposit because your Social Security benefits are automatically directly deposited. And so I would encourage you to just check those accounts because those dollars should be coming in.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely extraordinary. And we really appreciate you taking the time and being gentle with us as we are learning and for sticking around and answering the questions. Because we may be calling you back. So thank you so much for this. This has really been fantastic for all of us.
Well,
I'm going to ask now, thank you. I'm going to ask now Pastor Lamont Williams to come forth as always, give us just a brief reflection and close us out with prayer. Pastor Gailliard, thank you so much. And thank you all of our participants who joined us today, and of course our entire MAGE team and Triad Pastors Network.
I want to give a quick acknowledgement to you as the leader and the director for Miami Health Equity. We thank you for believing in the vision and being bold enough to voice for particular pastors in such a pandemic. I want to take a personal pause and say thank you, Pastor Gailliard, for an amazing and very thorough presentation. Pastors have been texting me on my phone while you were presenting, just saying how enormously grateful and helpful the information is. This is all in real time. I want to just say thank you that you were able to bring the pastoral leadership lens, but also the public policy. You spoke direct to pastors, and I want to say thank you for that. That is an amazing gift to be able to repackage that so that a local pastor could say not only this is you, but can text me back and say, I can use this and it's very helpful. So thank you, Pastor. Again, I want to say thank you to Bishop Sheldon Daniels, who was very gracious in getting that link for us, who has worked with our Triad Pastors Network. You have been very kind, and the return on this investment is still yet to be seen. Thank you again for that. To anyone who is listening, if you still did not get your questions in, or if you would like, Pastor Gailliard has been very gracious in providing us his PowerPoints. And so again, if you would like any of the information, resources, Excels that he spoke about, you can text that information in to 336-462-9503. It's the same number that our director has been announcing the entire time, 336-462-9503. I want to also thank all of the pastors who were on the call, who joined in today. I would be remiss if I did not thank the MAGE team as well, who worked behind the scenes to help make this happen today. And so we certainly want to thank all of you. In our closing, Pastor Gailliard spoke something something that really spoke to the mantra of who and what I live by. He said clearly that pastors are the trusted voice in our community. And I so agree with that. And I want to close my remarks by reminding you of a quote from Dr. Tribble, who says, "The center of the African American community has always been the African American church." And so when we're speaking directly to pastors, we are actually helping our community at large. And so I thank you again. I want to also ask anyone that is joining the call if you would save the date, May the 14th. 2 weeks from now, we are very gracious in getting a confirmation from the Reverend Dr. James Forbes, the pastor emeritus of the legendary Riverside Church out of New York, who will be one of our hosts for our National Day of Prayer during this pandemic. We all know that prayer is in order, and we're going to do a National Day of Prayer, calling us all around just what life looks like after the pandemic in the African American community. And so if you would put that date down, we'll be sending out more information, but that is May the 14th. Shall we close in prayer at this time? Gracious Lord, thank you now for another day that we've never seen before. We woke up this morning to a brand new day of mercy. Your word teaches us that great is thy faithfulness because your mercies are new every morning. Bless now our efforts, or bless the leader of this organization, Dr. Gailliard. Continue to give her invigorated vision, give her bold dreams. I pray that it would even, God, spur out and bless us as your people of recipients. Bless everyone under this call. Bless those who attempted to make the call but for whatever reason was not able to. So we leave this space, Lord, we dare not close without asking your blessings on the almost 60,000 Americans who have lost their lives to this very, very egregious pandemic, coronavirus. I ask you to bless their families, give them comfort even now, like only you can. And then those, oh Lord, who are even tested positive, may you touch them, Lord. They may not be depressed. They may be even inspired to know that you still have healing power. Thank you now. We close this prayer, Father. Be with us and guide us. We shall forever give your name the praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.